2020 really started to come into his own at the Colm Regionals, get top 32, and then was able to sort of beat his regional finish, getting into top 16 at Bochum. But this is what I absolutely love about the Pokemon Players Cup. You can make so much new Pokemon history, and Rafael, a newer player here on the scene, this is where he is establishing himself, and it's going to be very interesting in a couple of years to come to maybe look back at this point and see where he started his Pokemon career.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the beauties, like you say, about the Pokemon community on a whole, and having the access to these tournaments. You know, it's anyone's game at the end of the day, and it's always going to be these new players that are coming in and thriving and making the competition harder for the players that have already been around. And that's what excites me, at least. You know, I love seeing the players that we've seen in the past, but it's always the new players that I think coming in and really making their mark, like you say. But if we look at Rafael's team, you can see he has got that Sun kind of core, but an inclusion of something that you're going to be very happy about, Lou. He's got the Regieleki with the Groudon, the Charizard, got the Grimmsnarl, the Umbreon again, and the Gigantamax Venusaur.
Yeah, I love seeing that Regieleki there on the team. You know, a really fast, powerful electric type Pokemon that can come out and cause a little bit of chaos as well with something like an Electroweb, or even on occasion I have seen it go for that Dynamax, and it can go for some absolute devastation with a Max Lightning. But if we switch over to Tardan's side of the field, we've got that Zacian once again. We've also got Thundurus, Charizard, Torkoal, Gothitelle, and the Venusaur. So a very solid kind of Sun combination, but with kind of two different speed modes. We've got the Groudon being the Sunsetter on Rafael's side, and we know that tends to be kind of maybe favouring more speedy kinds of builds. Definitely speedy compared to Torkoal, which is known to be a very slow kind of Trick Room used Pokemon. But again, having access to that drought ability, it can set the sun. And sometimes when you have Torkoal and Venusaur on the field at the same time, it can be the best of both worlds. Chlorophyll makes Venusaur super speedy, and then Torkoal can also be there for maybe the slower mode if that's what you're going for.
Yeah, it give you like both sides of the spectrum, really. You know, if the Trick Room does go up, like you say, then Torkoal thrives. If the Trick Room's not up, then Venusaur thrives. So it's the best of both worlds almost, and such a good combination, and one that we've seen used to very good effect by a lot of players so far. The one thing that I would say that, you know, going into this match that we didn't have, we had in the last match, was Francesco had access to Incineroar and Intimidate, but Rafael doesn't really have access to that Intimidate going into this match against another Zacian, which could be quite difficult. You know, gonna have to rely on the Grimmsnarl quite heavily, I think, in this one, to make sure you've got your screens up to just give that extra bit of protection for when that Zacian does hit the field.
Yeah, exactly. Once you've got those sort of defenses in play as well, it does allow you that little bit of extra protection if, like you say, Lee, you don't have that Intimidate. But as well, you need to try and be able to pick up a KO against that Zacian where you can. If you're running a Sun mode, then you definitely have the options, and it's all about just utilising it, picking up that KO that's critical when you need it, and then being able to kind of steamroll through the rest of the team.
Yeah, and I think one thing when we go back to that, having the defenses and having a check to the Zacian, I think Regieleki, one of your favourites, Lou, comes in really handy for Rafael in this situation, because with access to the Electro Web, you can utilise that to slow down the Zacian, and then Charizard can kind of come into its own and get those big fire type attacks off and then really threaten the Zacian. So it's not completely safe at all, but that's what I'm looking forward to. I think looking forward to seeing how Rafael approaches this match without the Intimidate. You know, so many players rely so heavily on for that big threat in Zacian in particular.
Yeah, and it's nice seeing as well the kind of nod to a Trick Room team as well. We've got the Gothitelle on there, a Pokemon I really haven't seen a lot of in Series 8. It's definitely a unique peak, but it's certainly one that, you know, we know a lot from previous seasons and previous formats. It's a really well-known Trick Room setter. It can also get up to a few tricks here and there, and I think strategically the thing for me is I've always found it really hard to KO. If you don't have the utility to be able to maybe do really devastating damage, almost pick up an OHKO necessarily, then it can hang around on the field and really get up to a few tricks.
Yeah, and the ability that it has in Shadow Tag makes it very difficult to kind of lead as well, because you get those leads wrong and lead into something that's like susceptible to what the Gothitelle's partnered next to, and it's very difficult to kind of come back from, because at that point you're not able to reposition, you're not able to kind of combat what's in front of you. You've got to deal with the Gothitelle and its partner with what you've led with. So it creates these mind games in Team Preview from the get-go and makes it even more difficult. So there's another layer of the mind games already got on top of the ones that are already there before we even get into the match.
Yeah, the intensity just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, Lee. And of course, Gothitelle being the master of traps, let's trap you into our next game. We want to have you guys really focused. Let's jump into game one between these two players. I'm super excited to see how it's going to go down. We've got two very unique teams, and Tardan is going to be leading out with the Thundurus and the Zacian, whereas on the opposing side of the field, we have got Groudon and the Grimmsnarl.
Okay, so we've got the Grimmsnarl coming out with the Groudon against the Zacian and the Thundurus. Yeah, the Grimmsnarl going to be able to provide screen support, which is going to be so key to Rafael's side of the field, you know, because otherwise the Zacian can throw up some big attacks. It's got that attack boost already, so in a great position. Is it going to be able to pick up a knockout onto the Groudon? Probably not, but you've got to worry about maybe the Thundurus. Does that decide to go for the Dynamax here? It's not really the choice that you go for in front of a Groudon because its defensive capabilities are so high, and you know Thundurus is predominantly going to be a physical attacker if you do see that, the Defiant variant. But you've got so many options. You've got Max Steel Spike off an Iron Tail that could come out into the Grimmsnarl, do some big damage there, and it boosts the defenses, maybe making the longevity of Zacian a little bit better going forward. But going to see any of that, Lou. We're going to see the Charizard come straight in.
Yeah, shaking things up, and I think really wanting to make the most of the fact the sun is shining in the sky. Charizard wants to join the action so we can go for those really powerful fire-type attacks. And particularly, if it is the Solar Power variant, it's going to be able to boost its attacks even more with those powerful fire-type moves. But straight away, we're going to see the Groudon going into its Dynamax form here from Rafael. He is not messing around and just wants to get here on the physical offensive pressure coming out into that opposing Zacian here. Grimmsnarl also going to go for the Reflect, going to boost up the defenses on Rafael's side of the field here from any of those physical attacks from the Zacian. That is going to go straight for the Behemoth Blade. So going to be able to go and find its mark directly onto that opposing Grimmsnarl. Does a huge chunk of damage, and despite the Reflect, picks up a solid one-hit KO, Lee.
Yeah, huge turn here for Tardan to pick up the knockout onto the Grimmsnarl and kind of takes away that kind of support network for Rafael's side of the field. But we are seeing a return here of a Max Quake into the Zacian and picking up a big knockout there for the Groudon. And as a trade-off, I would say probably Rafael's probably come out on the better side of that because Tardan's just lost his restricted Pokemon, but the match isn't over by any stretch of the imagination because Tardan still has his Dynamax, or the ability to Dynamax something still in the bag.
Yeah, that's the thing. Grimmsnarl, it can get up to a few tricks, and obviously it could set up things like the light screen here in front of that Charizard, and that's something Rafael now no longer has access to. But I think you're rightly losing a restricted very early on in the game as well can sometimes put you on the back foot a little bit. You might have to kind of renegotiate how you're going to be able to trade your Pokemon around. But I'm sorry, I'm distracted. There is a Regieleki here on the field, but facing down against a Venusaur, and Tardan has been able to pivot the two Pokemon that love the sun out here in the front.
Yeah, the Regieleki going to be really useful against particularly the Charizard, but does have to be careful and wary about the Venusaur, because if the Venusaur does max, it's obviously got access to its Chlorophyll ability, going to be potentially the fastest thing on the field and can damage and hit that Groudon for super effective damage, so you can't take that lightly. But, you know, the Charizard probably in not the greatest position here, maybe wants to protect, maybe wants to switch out, but it's a tough switch out really, because you've got the Thundurus in the back that doesn't really want to come in on any sort of electric type attacks either. So Rafael's setting himself up in a really nice position, but it's going to be how Tardan kind of utilizes his Venusaur going forward in this match.
Well, Tardan is going to match the Dynamax of Rafael on one side of the field, but instead of Groudon, because obviously there's one not on the field, it's going to be that Venusaur. And I think this is always an interesting choice when you've got Venusaur and Charizard next to each other. Which one are you going to Dynamax? Both of them are able to go for Residual Effect, unique G-Max move in Vine Lash for this Venusaur, so that could certainly be something that Rafael has to watch out for. Charizard is going to go straight up for the Protected, doesn't want to take any potential Rock-type moves coming out from the opposing Groudon here. Charizard is, of course, protecting itself up here from the Regieleki, but it looks like that was going for the Electro Web, and it is going to be reducing the speed of that Venusaur, something critical considering it's liking the speed that's being set by the sun. And the Vine Lash is going to come down into this Regieleki. Extra Focus Sash, it's able to hang on, but we know due to the residual effect of this Vine Lash, Regieleki will be leaving us at the end of this turn.
Yeah, really nice play here from Tardan, just making sure that, you know, concentrating down on the Pokemon that is the threat to your Charizard, and that is the Regieleki, making sure that you do pick up the knockout if it is Focus Sashed with the residual damage from the G-Max Vine Lash, which is a really nice play, and it starts that residual chip as well. Groudon got one more turn, its Dynamax turns left, and the Groudon only got one partner Pokemon left now with the Regieleki falling there. So Tardan's done really well to kind of pull the momentum back now, and the swing feels like it's in his kind of side of the court. But again, Rafael going to be bringing in the Charizard, which Venusaur doesn't really like facing down on either. But the big thing is, Lou, there is no sun present on the field right now.
Yeah, honestly, going for that max rockfall really was a great strategy there from Rafael. You saw the amount of damage it did through Protect to that Charizard. It is 4 times effective against Charizard, but even still, really chipping away at it. And of course, removing the sun means Venusaur isn't going to have its Chlorophyll ability activated, and then it's also at -1 speed thanks to the Electro Web. Charizard looks like it was going for the Heat Wave there, but missed the opposing Charizard there. Able to connect on the Venusaur, but thanks to the sun, not going to be able to deal too much damage. And really interesting to see the Ancient Power come out from one Charizard into another. It's not enough to pick up the KO, but with the sand on the field, Charizard on Rafael's side is going to be leaving us at the end of this turn. The Precipice Blades coming out, connecting on the Venusaur. I like this, boosting up your special defense, particularly when you're against 2 special attackers on the opposing side of the field. But Ancient Power on a Charizard, it's been a long time since I've seen that. And Max Rockfall coming out from the Venusaur just in case the weather wanted to change up. You want to make sure you've got the sand there just to make sure that Charizard goes down.
Had to make sure that you were getting that Charizard at that low health. A really nice play though, like Lou, like you said, the Ancient Power, really nice play there. Just missing the knockout onto the Charizard though, but you know, just ensuring it there and making sure that this next turn that the you know, the sun isn't in play and you've got that sand stream in play, which maybe doesn't benefit the Venusaur and the Charizard as much as it actually does Rafael, really. So one more turn with the Venusaur to go for a potential attack into the Groudon, but the thing is, with that Electro Web earlier from the Regieleki, the Charizard's kind of in a position now where it's not going to be able to hit hard enough into the Groudon because of those special defense boosts. So you're kind of relying, if you are Tarrant, to get the damage you need to on the Groudon this turn and survive an attack.
Yeah, and a few defensive plays coming around here. Groudon and Charizard both going for the Protect, as Venusaur is able to use its, I believe its final max move, and of course goes for the G-Max Vine Lash, trying to deal some super effective damage to Rafael's Groudon, but through the Protect it really doesn't do a lot. And this is where the damage, the residual damage, is starting to come into effect. You can see the sand chip coming around, but you can also see the Vine Lash having its residual damage. And I think it's critical to note as well, the sand is not affecting the Charizard. There's a safety goggles on there, Lee.
Yeah, it's a good pickup there, Lou. And the Charizard not taking the damage, because if you are Rafael, you're kind of like, well, the Charizard's probably only got a few turns left in it with the chip. So the Charizard's still in a position now where it could potentially do some good damage, but you're relying on a critical hit with these special defense boosts that the Groudon's got.
Groudon going to take the Heat Wave here and goes for the Rock Slide. It's able to find its mark on both of Tarrant's Pokemon here. Looks like he's able to get a double KO. I mean, that's the thing. When you're up against a Flying type Pokemon and a Ground type Pokemon, you can't go for those Precipice Blades to try and get a double KO because one of them is just going to naturally avoid it. So you have to cross your fingers for those Rock Slides and hope that they're going to be able to connect. Tarrant, however, does still have that Thundurus in the back.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, Rafael, like with... You know, it's a really difficult spot because Thundurus is not really generally the Pokemon that you'd want to bring in against the Groudon here, because of just the defensive capabilities of Groudon. But at this such low health, like, you know, Tarrant's done enough for the Groudon where the Thundurus can come in now and just go for a superpower, potentially pick up the knockout or one of its other attacking options, maybe got Lash Out or something like that it can take advantage of and really close this one out. So very close game, but the Thundurus kind of preserving it right till now. It does hang on. Is the Rock Slide going to be enough?
It's able to survive the foul play, and the Thundurus in return is able to survive the Rock Slide. It was able to find its mark, and of course the sand has left the field. There's no more residual damage, but we saw the Thundurus was able to outspeed, and foul play is just going to be able to come out and reconnect. Oh, that was an intense endgame to this game 1, Lee.
Very, very close there, Lou, and the Thundurus just locking it up there for Tarrant, but like finger biting at the end there with that survival, because the Rock Slide gets a critical hit in that situation, then the Thundurus is gone. But yeah, like we were just in the middle of saying, how important it was for Tarrant to kind of preserve that Thundurus until the late game, so he at least had the kind of the HP numbers to come in and close that one up pretty safely in the end there. But big props to Rafael, made it very difficult for Tarrant to get any sort of momentum in that match and kind of get to a point where you thought, oh, he's probably going to be able to take this. It was right down to the wire, and a very exciting game for us to kick off with in the second match of today.
Yeah, really nice to see a Thundurus taking down a Groudon. Not something you get to see every day, but having access to something like Foul Play, I think was a great choice there for Tarrant, being able to combat down against that Groudon, particularly when we know that Groudons like to run around with Swords Dance. So being able to boost up their attack stat might actually be their downfall a little bit later on, as we know Foul Play will work off the physical attack stat that Pokemon has, and the higher their attack stat, the higher the damage.
Yeah, it's a really nice shout. You know, it's a really good mitigation tool to utilize against sword stance. You know, there are going to be opportunities where your opponent has got the board position to throw up the sword stance if they want. And then if you're in a really tricky spot, it's going to be hard to kind of come back from. But with the Thunderous, it allows you, the Pokemon, to come in and really punish those sword stances as well. And we saw it there. You know, it did a big chunk of damage without any sword stance boosters. So you can imagine what the damage would be like if the Groudon does get to that +2 attack stat. But yeah, Thunderous, one of my favorite Pokemon, and I'm so pleased to see it thrive in this Series 8 format, and it is showing that it's a very good Pokemon in general for players to kind of utilize, especially with that Defiant ability, and it pairs up nicely with things like Zacian as well that really do get hindered a little bit by the Intimidate abuse of some players.
Yeah, and I think having the Zacian in that game 1 as well, that was a really kind of dominant turn 1, coming out, picking up the solid KO against the Grimmsnarl, but then getting KO'd in return. It certainly looked to be quite a dynamic start from our players. So let's jump into game 2 and see if they're going to start in the same kind of way, or maybe if they're going to slow the pace down in game 2. It's one of those difficult situations. Tardan is 1 game up. So Rafael has to win out the next 2 to be able to win the set and remain in the winner's bracket. Tardan going for this Thunderous and Zacian combination once again out there in the lead, and it's going to be Grimmsnarl and Groudon once again. So a same situation as game 1 is happening in game 2.
Yeah, and you've got the situation where does Tardan want to go after the Grimmsnarl again, and is Rafael going to give it up so freely this time? And, you know, I say give it up for free. You've got the Reflect Up, which we saw how important that was throughout the match. But if you could kind of keep Grimmsnarl around for a little bit later on, maybe the Light Screen would also be very beneficial. But the Groudon in a great position now to max if it wants to, and get that knockout onto the Zacian. But you've got to worry about a substitute coming out from that slot as well.
Well, Tardan actually going to be Dynamaxing up the Thunderous, something I know, Lee, you will be delighted to see. Very, very powerful Pokemon up here in front. And this is where things could get interesting with things like speed control, if maybe there's going to be something like a max Airstream coming out here from the Thunderous. But Rafael going to match with a Dynamax of their very own.
Yeah, and like I say, you know, the speed control here could be quite important, especially for that Zacian in a late game. But you've also got the max knuckle access on the Thunderous as well that can boost attack of not only your Thunderous but your Zacian as well, to give it that +2 from the +1 that it's currently on and make it even more threatening going into the next turn.
Oh, I love that play there, boosting up the attack. That would be amazing. Let's see if it happens. Zacian going to take the Protect, particularly in the face of this Groudon, as Grimmsnarl once again sets up the Reflect to help out the defenses on Rafael's side of the field, protecting from any of those physical attack damages. It's going to be the max Airstream coming out, though, going to be boosting up the speed by +1 on Tardan's side of the field. So no max Knuckle Lee, but instead it's going to be +1 speed. And of course, the Intrepid Sword ability on Zacian has put it at +1 attack as well. Groudon is, however, going to go for this max Quake, targeting down, coming off pressing this blades into the Zacian, and it does, oh, it looks like almost a third of damage there. That is through Protect, just showing the sort of damage capabilities of this Groudon, particularly when it's in Dynamax.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and these attacks are hitting so hard. You know, Zacian in a tricky spot now, because it can go after the Grimmsnarl here and pick up the knockout and get rid of that kind of line of support for Rafael, but he's found himself in a situation now where he's got the ability to get a Light Screen off if he wants, which helps out maybe against things like Charizard and Venusaur that we saw in that last match, which is a bonus really, because you're a step on. But of course at the same time, the Zacian's still on the field now for Tardan, so he can utilize that however he wants this next turn. Got to be careful as well, because Behemoth Blade will still do a lot of damage to the Groudon if he attacks into that slot. But the Thunderous and it getting the Airstream off that last turn was a really nice play, because it kind of mitigates the idea of the Regieleki being able to come in and be so dominant with that speed control, the Electro Webs. You're going to have the speed jump on those now with that +1 speed stat that you've just obtained.
Well, speaking of speed, things are going to change a little bit with the scary face coming out, going down into the Zacian there. It's going to be the max Airstream coming out from the Grimmsnarl, going into the Grimmsnarl, sorry. And you can see the sort of the defenses from that Reflect really kind of helping out protect out Rafael's side of the field, so Grimmsnarl able to have now survived 2 of those max Airstreams. The Behemoth Blade is going to come out and connect down into the opposing Grimmsnarl here, going to be able to pick up the KO, and Grimmsnarl will be no more, but it's leaving Groudon in a really kind of open position here. It's still sitting there at full HP and is free to go for another one of these max moves. Instead, it's going to target down that Thunderous with a max Rockfall. Does a huge, devastating amount of damage, but not enough to pick up the KO thanks to Thunderous being in that Dynamax form.
Yeah, and now the Thunderous for Tardan. If we do see the Regieleki come onto the field for Rafael, you know, Tardan in that position where he's forced to go for a max airstream this next turn, because that scary face play was perfect. You don't necessarily need to worry too much about the light screen if you're Rafael, because you're going for these max quakes, boosting your special defense all the time, so that's really helping you out a bunch. But at the same time, now the Regieleki going to be able to go for an electric web, which puts Zacian in a really difficult spot unless the Thunderous goes for that max airstream. And if it does that, it's not really hitting anything very hard, and you're not getting much out of this last turn of your Dynamax turns with the Thunderous. So you can't really take Zacian for granted here, but you're going to be in a position to maybe remove it from the field now if you utilize the ground and go for another max quake into that slot.
Yeah, that's the thing. The Scary Face bringing that Zacian back down to kind of neutral speed. Regieleki can naturally outspeed that Zacian, so it's certainly looking to be in a formidable position here. But Regieleki actually going to go straight away here for the Protect. So it's going to be leaving itself a little bit vulnerable to having its, you know, Focus Sash broken here. And as you can see, it has been done by that Max Airstream. But Tardan really wanting to focus down on making sure that the speed is set on his side of the field. And now Thunderous, I believe, is now at +3, and the Zacian is at +1. Zacian is going to be protecting itself from any potential damage coming out here. Groudon is going to be going for another one of those max rock falls, targeting down into the Thunderous and picking up a KO. So it was a little bit of a grind there to try and remove the Dynamax Pokemon on Tardan's side, but Raphael's been able to do it.
Yeah, he's removed the Thunderous now. It's not really a threat. We're not going to have a same or similar end game as we did in that first one. But the big thing here for Tardan is he got that Airstream off, which is so important for him for utilizing the Zacian this next turn, you know. It's going to outspeed the Regieleki. The Sash that we saw in Game 1 on Raphael's side of the field has been broke, so it's going to be able to be knocked out here. The Groudon isn't going to be in a position to kind of give that protection and going to be threatened by the Venusaur. We don't know if there is potentially some sort of sleep powder on the Venusaur as well that could put the Groudon out of action and make things a lot easier for that Zacian to kind of close this end game up.
That's the thing with Sleep Powder and the fact that it's open team sheets as well. Tardan will be able to be informed if any of these Pokemon are running things like a safety goggles or a Lumberry, so that can factor into his calculations as well coming down into this next turn.
Yeah, and you know, I think if you are Rafael, you probably want to try and reposition yourself, maybe get the Regieleki out of here, because otherwise you're kind of just giving it up for free. But at the same time, you're not giving it up for free almost. If you can get the Precipice Blades onto the Zacian here, it's a good return, but you are losing your Regieleki. That's going to be probably one of the more useful tools against potentially a Charizard in the late game.
Well, Precipice Blades will not be connecting on the Zacian that has protected. It's going to be, I think it was an Electro Web coming out there from the opposing, on the Regieleki, but it wasn't able to find either mark. Precipice Blades does come out though, is able to connect down onto the opposing Venusaur, but Zacian doing a wise job here of protecting itself. Groudon is going to be taken by a very powerful Leaf Storm coming out from the opposing Venusaur. Of course, it is now going to have its stats dropped a little bit, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Tardan maybe try and get this Venusaur off the field where possible.
Yeah, and the Zacian now still in that position like it was in the previous turn, but now it's got the choice. Does it go after the Groudon now, or do you just get rid of the Regieleki? Now, getting rid of the Groudon, it's the biggest threat on the opposing side of the field right at this present, you know? So that would be a good option. The Behemoth Blade going to be able to pick up the knockout. The Regieleki, very unlikely to pick up the knockout on the Zacian, and it gives you then the freedom, like you say, to get the Venusaur off the field, reset those special attack drops, and maybe utilize it later on in this game.
Well, Zacian going to be able to go for that Behemoth Blade. Going to be targeting down into the Groudon that, you know, was a relatively low HP anyway and is able to pick up the solid KO. And this just means that Zacian and the Venusaur on Tardan's side can breathe a sigh of relief. You saw how devastating that Precipice Blades was to the Venusaur, and we know it can pick up a solid KO against that Zacian. But Electro Web this time able to find its mark with a cheeky little critical hit on that opposing Zacian. And this is where Regieleki really is coming into its own. You can see how happy it is to be on the field. It's doing a great job. It deserves to be delightful. But, you know, it's done a really good job. It now needs to take a nap. And that's exactly what Venusaur has said to it. You know, you just take a little time out now. Stop lowering our speed. I'm going to put you to sleep.
Too tired now, but it got the Electro Web off, which is so important, you know, because now the Charizard can come in and put a bit more pressure onto Tardan's side of the field. Although you've just reset the stat boost to the Zacian, so the Zacian's still going to be able to hit hard, but you know, it's normal attacks, it's fighting, and its steel type attacks aren't very effective against Charizard, so in a great position to fire off maybe a heat wave here and clear the field, but does have to worry about the sleep powder, but maybe it's got an item that can kind of overwrite that threat here. And Charizard generally without the sun for the Venusaur is going to outspeed the Venusaur, so it puts a lot of pressure on here, and it gives Regieleki a couple of turns to maybe wake up after its little nap that it's having at the moment.
Yeah, it takes one little turn there. You see the little D's, but Zacian is going to be able to pick up a KO against it with the close combat. But if there is one thing that Charizard really likes to see, it's two Pokemon that are weak to fire type moves, and it is running the move Heat Wave. It's exactly what it goes for. It's able to connect on both of Tardan's Pokemon and pick up a solid double KO here. I think there's been a running theme in our broadcast so far of Charizard's hitting Heat Wave to do some absolute destruction on the Pokemon battlefield, and Rafael's Charizard is no exception.
No, definitely not, and doing a really nice job there just to clean the field. And if Tardan's last Pokemon is this Charizard, the sand ending just now is really not the best situation for him. Sorry, he's not got Weather Ball, he's got the Ancient Power that we saw in that game on, so it doesn't really matter about the sand ending there. The Ancient Power is going to be a huge tool for him to utilize in this game going forward, but we do see a Hurricane. Ooh. Wow, critical hit, Lou.
Didn't see that coming. I was about to go, you know, Hurricane with the potential confusion chance. You know, that could be an excellent way for him to come through this game. But no, with the critical hit, you know, Charizard, I think we kind of, you know, hyped up Charizard a little bit there. I was like, commentators, I'm listening. I'm going to get a critical hit and do what we love to see and push it to a game 3.
Yeah, excellent. I'm pleased we're going to get another set as well, because this is a really good back and forth match. A lot of mind games going on, but I really thought Tardan had it there with the, you know, revealed the Ancient Power in game 1. You think, okay, it comes in, it's got probably the better option there against the opposing Charizard, but Rafael saying he's not finished yet. Let's get this Hurricane off, let's hit. And like you say, it does have a confusion chance. The critical hit there was huge though, to close the game up and kind of tie it going into a game 3, but yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, I always love moments like that. And of course, both these Charizards, they could very well be trained to be at kind of the same speed as well. So often there's these kind of dice rolls that come into these last turns of a game. But it looked like, you know, obviously the information we've got so far on the left-hand side, that was the speedier Charizard coming out there from Rafael. And, you know, certainly was able to clinch him out the game with that Hurricane. As we know, like you said, Lee, the Ancient Power there, we know it doesn't necessarily pick up the KO, but that could have just been a roll, potentially could have got it again. We'll never know. But we'll be able to find out in game 3 for sure.
Yeah, we will definitely. I'm just sitting here thinking, I'm more like,
I'm in shock.
Okay, well, yeah, I was still a little bit shocked. I'm thinking I did not see the match panning out like that. So happy it has, of course, because we get more of this match, which is great. But like you say, the Ancient Power inclusion there, it would come down to a speed time maybe, because then Rafael's Charizard, if it is able to survive that 100% of the time, which he may have been able to train his Charizard in a specific way to take that, then the Hurricane does need to hit twice, so you need to hit one Hurricane in a Heat Wave to kind of lock it up. So we don't really know the ins and outs of the details there. It was kind of cut short before we could find out. But the big thing with the Ancient Power is obviously you've got a chance to get the boost across every single stat of your Pokemon. You've got that chance, so you know there's always a chance Tardan could have used it there, maybe got the boost across the board, and then had the chance to really just close it up there. So a lot of variables, and I think that's the beauty about this. You know, this set in particular, there are a lot of variables there. Both trainers have a lot of tools that they can utilize, and they are taking advantage of. But it's the big battle of the Groudon, isn't it? And how you know, Tardan's approaching that match, because if you can deal with the Groudon in an effective way, like Tardan approached it well there, but in the end the Groudon did far too much work and was able to get the special defense boost, which was kind of key to really closing the match up and allowing him in the position with the Charizard to get the Hurricane off.
Yep, having special defense boost and reflect on the field certainly does give you that longevity. But let's jump into game 3 and see exactly how this winners round 6 match is going to go down. Who's going to remain in the winners bracket and who is going to jump down to the losers bracket. No changes up here for Tardan though. We see a Zacian and a Thundurus on the field once again, and no surprises as well. Grimmsnarl and Groudon coming out. These two players know exactly what leads they want to bring.
Yeah, 3 for 3 here, and you can't see anything being different for Rafael. He wants to get that reflect up. It's the best option he's got to kind of mitigate the attack boost that the Zacian's got on Tardan's side of the field. And with how effective the Thunderous was at disrupting Rafael's kind of game plan, especially with the late game Regieleki in mind to bring in to get the Electro Webs, those speed boosts with the Thunderous were really, really key there. So maybe Tardan wants to go down that route again, get those speed boosts in the bag, and maybe approach tackling the Groudon a little bit quicker. But again, you can't ignore the Grimmsnarl because we had that scary face revealed in that last match. So that's something that you've really got to consider going into this match, and make sure that your Zacian isn't really subjected to that, because one scary face and a Max Quake is going to be the end of the game for Zacian.
Yeah, I absolutely love the fact that Scary Face has become a much more popular move on Grimmsnarl, because it's able to utilize that prankster ability, and you can just get a really kind of cheeky speed drop against your opponent, and that can help your partner Pokemon pick up a really critical KO. Tardan, however, is going to be sticking with the Dynamax Pokemon of game 2, and it is going to be that Thunderous. Raphael, however, once again going for this early Dynamax, and you know, we see sometimes early game or late game Dynamax, but not for these players. Groudon once again is going to get itself with its HP stat doubled and get itself in a really dominant position here. This is once again where Tardan has a decision to make. Raphael's going to have the decision. Is it going to be the Max Quake or the Max Rockfall? And Tardan's decision is, I'm calling it's going to be the Quake, so I'm going to protect up my Zacian. Grimmsnarl going to go here for the Reflect once again, boosting up the sort of physical defense stat there of Raphael's side of the field, and a Max Airstream coming out once again from the Thunderous going down into this Grimmsnarl. So far this turn, Lee, is playing out very much like turn 1 of game 2.
Yeah, and probably turn 2 as well, I would say. There may be some variations, but one of the things that you could do if you are, you know, Tardan, and you want to preserve your Zacian for later on, is maybe think about switching Zacian into something like the Charizard. It's going to be able to avoid the Max Quake that's inevitably going to come out from that slot. But you've got to worry, because the last game, this is where Rafael kind of took the decision to really try and concentrate a little bit more down on the Thunderous, I think. He did lose the Grimmsnarl at that time, but it was enough to get a Scary Face off. You've got to worry about that as well, because the Scary Face is such an obvious thing to come out here into the Zacian. And Zacian feels like it's going to be a really important Pokemon in the late game, not as well as this first one, but I think it's really hard for Tardan, because your attention's kind of tied between both sides of the field. You can't ignore the Groudon, it's so powerful, but at the same time you can't ignore the Grimmsnarl because of the tools that it's got and the disruption that it provides something like Raphael's side of the field.
Well, like you said, Lee, maybe the Charizard's going to come in here in place of that Precipice Blaze, but if you're Raphael, did you maybe call it and potentially have gone for something like a Max Rockfall into that slot? Charizard is going to have to take the Scary Face though. Its speed will be lowered by 2 stages, as Thunderous is able to go for that Max Airstream. So going to boost up the Charizard to only a -1 speed deficit, and of course continue the speed build there on the Thunderous. But I really want to know what this Groudon has done. I wasn't able to catch a sneak peek. It is going for the Max Rockfall, and its target is going to be that Thunderous. So Raphael making the solid call, going, you know what, I think Thunderous is going to stay here. Let's get that really big damage down. Let's get the sand up as well. We can start chipping away, and that also stops, if Charizard does come in, you know, it being able to utilize the sun the way that it wants.
Yeah, and the one thing here that Raphael's done is make things very difficult. Like, Tardan has got the Zacian in the back to utilize in the late game, but it's not really going to be very good in a late game against 4 Pokemon. At the same time, the Charizard coming in now, the Scary Face putting it in a really awkward position. So we are seeing it retreat, and the Zacian hit the field once again. Now, does Rafael pick up on the switch out?
Oh, this is where things get intense. It's almost like chopping and changing with the Zacian and the Charizard. Grimmsnarl going for the Scary Face once again. It is indeed a very scary face on that Grimmsnarl. Going to go straight into the Zacian and bring its speed down by 2 stages. Thunderous once again very happy to go for these Max Airstreams and picks up a KO against Grimmsnarl. So it can no longer get up to any of those speed altering tricks. And of course, that does, however, give Raphael a free switch in, which can put him into a great position going into this next turn. But what I want to see is this Groudon. What decision has it gone for? It's going to be the Max Rockfall once again, and targeting down into the Thunderous. Just wants to remove it here from play.
Yeah, and it's a nice play just to make sure, you know, the one thing that you're going to probably guarantee stays on the field on Tardan's side, if you're Raphael, is going to be the Thunderous, going for that Max Airstream because of the threat from the Scary Face. And now it's a perfect opportunity to bring in something like Regieleki, like we saw in that game 1, where it can come in, really disrupt the Zacian that's already on -1, I believe. And then if something like the Charizard comes in as well, it becomes very difficult to kind of gain that momentum. But with the Venusaur coming in, it is going to be able to at least resist the electric type attacks and you know, caused some issues for the Groudon, and it hasn't got those special defense boosts like it had in that previous game, so it is going to be a bit more susceptible to those you know, leaf storms and the grass type attacks that Venusaur can threaten it with.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we know that Venusaur as well can carry, we've seen it already, the sleep powder. So it can choose to try and put one of Rafael's Pokemon potentially asleep. Maybe he wants to even try and remove the threat of the Groudon, help out his partner Zacian a little bit, maybe try and put it to sleep a little bit so that the Groudon can start targeting down the opposing so that Zacian can start targeting down the partner Pokemon on Rafael's side. That Regieleki, although it's very happy, it can certainly get up to a little bit of disruption, but just once again protecting itself here. Going to take its chip from the weather, of course, but it will be able to, you know, fingers crossed, survive out the turn unless some critical hit's going to do some damage through a Protect. Protect on Zacian's side, though, going to protect it from the Precipice Blades coming out from the Groudon, but once again, the Venusaur is not going to be so lucky, and it does a huge chunk of damage. It looks like the Venusaur was actually targeting down into that Regieleki.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense to do that. You remove the Regieleki and then it frees up Zacian to kind of be a bit more offensive. But here, the problem lies with the Regieleki, where it can still go for that. That Protect was great because now it allows for the Electro Web and the Precipice Blades, which is, you know, going to be a combination. It's going to be able to clear the field if we don't see any switches on Tardan's side. And the thing is, you've only got the Charizard in the back to come in. You really need to try and get rid of the Regieleki as soon as possible, but with the Electro Web support, it's feeling very difficult for Tardan to be able to do that right now. And Rafael's still got a fourth Pokemon to reveal in this match, which might be enough to kind of tip him over the edge so far.
Yeah, Regieleki just going for that Electro Web once again, doing a decent amount of chip to the Venusaur, and obviously that's going to stack up with the Sand as well. It also gets a critical here, which is probably why it ticked up a little bit more HP than I was expecting. And I think the critical thing, of course, bringing down the speed on the opposing side of the field. Groudon able to find its mark with the Precipice Blades on both of these Pokemon, outspeeding the Zacian and the Venusaur, and picks up a solid double KO against Tardan. This really does put Rafael in the driving seat, because once again, the Regieleki is now in a great position where it can keep going for those electric type moves, and we know the Pokemon that's in the back, Lee.
Yeah, it is that Charizard, unfortunately, and it coming in here is it's in the worst possible position ever, really, in front of a Regieleki on such low health, you know. It is going to be, sorry, on full health. It's in a little better position. It's still in a terrible position because the Regieleki going to be in a position to go for an Electro Web and then follow that up with a Rock Slide from the Groudon. Going to be more than enough to deal with the Charizard. And it looks like close this one up for Rafael with just an amazing use of Groudon, Grimmsnarl, and then that Regieleki in that last match, which was just a little bit too much there for Tardan to kind of get beyond, especially with the Thunderous.
Oh, 100%. And the Regieleki really was a great Pokemon to come in there at the end. Like you said, the Electro Web really being able to disrupt the kind of speed strategy that Tardan was going for those max airstreams, boosting up the speed. But the combination, I think, of making sure that you had Scary Face on the Grimmsnarl, and then, hey, Grimmsnarl's gone, I'm going to bring in Regieleki that can go for Electro Webs, just meant that Tardan was constantly on the back foot when it came to those speed tiers, and it just allowed Rafael the opportunity to be able to pick up some really big damage with the Groudon.
Yeah, and the turning point in that last game was when I discussed it, where you could potentially save your Zacian switching the Charizard to kind of waste the turn of the Dynamax, but by almost doing that, you're allowing the Grimmsnarl an extra turn that it wouldn't have otherwise had. You know, in the previous games, we've seen the Zacian stay in and be the sacrifice there, where it does in turn take down the Grimmsnarl for its troubles, but being able to allow the Grimmsnarl that extra turn on the field really